is that while racism is wide and wider in American society, sexism is deeper. Really is. So let's talk about it. Because you think about it, women who finish seminary, they can't get pulpits. They have to create their own churches. Oftentimes that happens. So let's talk about that. What does this portend for women in politics? What does this portend? And will she go with Vice President Biden if he becomes a nominee? Will she uh, build another, you know, fill out this coalition with Bernie Sanders? I mean, because a lot of real political decisions have to be made. Should a woman be on the ticket? Will that balance things out? Everybody's talking about these older white men who are who the last men standing. But the thing is, these are people who have appeal. You got to appeal to people now. That's the reality. And so, you know, call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. And we're also going to talk to Congressman Ro Khanna, the Silicon Valley congressman, everybody calls him, because he does represent Silicon Valley. He's been a very, very big executive. And he's also a Chicago guy.
Yes.
Did you know he went to the U of C? Phi Beta Kappa graduate from the University of Chicago.
That I didn't know.
That's right.
But,
It's like my family school. My brother went there. My dad went there. That's why we're in Chicago.
no.
And so it'll be very interesting. But he's also a lawyer. Went to U of C, then he went to Yale Law School, and he's a real dedicated progressive. I think it was one of his grandparents was jailed for 4 years as an ally of Mohandas K. Gandhi.
Okay.
So he comes from a really strong progressive tradition, and I can't wait to talk with him today about why he's supporting Bernie Sanders and why he feels that we should too. So, and what the progressive movement, where we're going from here, because you know they're still counting the votes in California. We talked about that yesterday.
Yes.
More than 10 million votes were cast in California, and about 5.3 million as of 2 days ago had been counted. You've got provisional ballots, you've got absentee ballots. So the count in California is not over. Didn't we talk a few weeks ago about it taking days and weeks to get the final count?
Yes, we
Now, I
did.
don't mind that. But I do mind someone being declared a winner and the front runner, and then we're supposed to just run to the convention and support one person when we haven't had 30 plus other contests. So think about that, everybody. The race is not over. It's not. It's not. So I can't wait to talk with Ro about that, and you know, bring in one or two other people to chat with him. But first, we're going to talk with him all to ourselves.
Mhm.
So, Lady B, how you doing today?
I'm doing good.
All right, all right. You look fabulous. You look like you're on your way out today. Cha cha. Love it, love it, love it. You know you're looking fabulous. You're looking
Thank
fabulous. Well, you know, let's run through some headlines before we talk to our wonderful panel about Elizabeth Warren and the way forward, everybody. She has ended her brilliant and issue focused campaign, according to this headline in Common Dreams. But what does she do next? Will she create an alliance with Bernie Sanders or with Joe Biden? With Joe Biden, hey, if he runs to the White House, she'd have a front row seat. She could be on the ticket. She could become a cabinet member. There's a lot that she could do. These are political decisions that we have to make now, even as we hold on to our principles, everybody. So think about that. Progressives are calling for her to continue to fight alongside us. I don't think that she would stop, but we'll see where she ends up. Did you know, as I shared with you, millions and millions and millions, millions upon millions of votes are still being counted in California? Are you getting impatient? Do you think we should call? Um, do you think we should call the race already? Karl Rove, of all people, says that Bernie Sanders still has a path to the nomination. That's right. This came from the Daily Wire. Um, the overall takeaway they write from Super Tuesday is that former Vice President Joe Biden won the night. However, Karl Rove, who's now a contributor on Fox News, believes that Senator Sanders has a path to the nomination because of California. He said, quote, let's not kid ourselves. We're focused on Biden, who had a big night, but the guy who had a better morning is Bernie, because the results are coming in from California. He said that on Fox and Friends on Wednesday. So we will see. Even though Vice President Biden has the delegate lead at this moment, I wouldn't count out uh, the wisdom of Karl Rove. Whether you agree with him or disagree with his politics, he is a brilliant tactician. He really is. He's part of the reason that we have lost these 1,000 plus seats, because he and two other chief Republican operatives sat down and sketched out a plan, and that is to overtake all levels of government except the presidency when President Barack Obama became president. In fact, and it is detailed in Dave Daly's book, Rat Effed. You need to get it. It's detailed in his book. He said, no, they sat down and they planned all of this, and they did. So we're going to talk with Ro Khanna about the numbers that he needs to win. Everybody, Mike Bloomberg has plans for a new group to support the Democratic nominee. That's good news. And guess what? You know, I like this guy. Yes, I do. Romney, former Governor Romney, Senator Romney, he said, there's no question the appearance is not good. But while he still considers his vote, he's trying to derail the Republican subpoena targeting the Bidens. I appreciate that. Don't you? I do. You know, although I think, we do need transparency everywhere.
Right.
But, when it's politically motivated and focused like this,
No.
it's not a good thing. It's not a good look. You can't really trust it. Alabama has executed Nathaniel Woods. We're going to talk about this story next week, everybody. A prisoner convicted of capital murder for the 2004 killings of 3 police officers, although someone else confessed he did not do it, everybody. The execution by lethal injection came after the U.S. Supreme Court issued a temporary stay to consider last-minute appeals, and then they denied the inmates' petitions. And the Alabama governor, Kay Ivey, denied a request for clemency. Figures as prominent as Martin Luther King III joined a list of activists that tried to stop this prosecution. Did not work, and so we're going to talk about this. It was just heartbreaking as I watched his lawyer plead for his life on television last night. Did you know that the Department of Veteran Affairs has for decades unlawfully turned away thousands of veterans with other than honorable discharges? That's right, rendering some of the most vulnerable veterans invisible. It's more than 400,000 who are at risk. People are discharged from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines for all kinds of reasons, but they still should be able to go to the VA. But they're being turned away, everybody. They're being turned away. Shame, 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 shame on all of us for that. I just come across so many of these stories, Lady B. You know I do. And this gig economy it is really hurting people who are coping with the coronavirus. First of all, they don't have full benefits, and they cannot afford. If you don't work, you don't eat when you're in the gig economy. That's right. The CDC is saying go to work, but President Trump is saying that you can go to work and get better. Whom do we believe? Wow. If you're asymptomatic, I don't know. And in the meantime, the U.S. markets are dropping sharply. They're on a roller coaster ride because, one of the centers for manufacturing in the world is China. A lot of workers are having to stay home, for example. That's right. So the markets are dropping, and more than 70 organizations on Thursday demanded that the Trump administration forbid monopolies or price gouging on vaccines and coronavirus treatments. Wow. Do you think that will work? I think you need to call your congressman in the upper and lower houses so that you can make sure that they do that. Okay. There's a cruise ship with thousands that are awaiting test results. Can you believe that, being stuck on that cruise ship? It's like that's a laboratory for the coronavirus, right? But panic buying, everybody, is limiting purchases of toilet paper and masks. Costco is saying, oh, we're doing bang-up business, but they're running out of merchandise, like toilet tissue. Wherever you can find it, please get it. Airlines are facing a $113 billion hit because of the coronavirus. I just got a couple of letters yesterday, a couple of conferences that I was due to attend over the next few weeks. Canceled. Canceled. Everybody, the Blackhawks were triumphant over the Oilers last night, 4-3. The Chicago Bulls will be playing tonight, and so we're very, very excited about that. The Bucks are going to be playing the Lakers. Oh, yes. The Dow was down 969 points. This roller coaster has wiped out all of the gains that they have made, the gains and the losses. I mean, we've just lost over the past few weeks. The NASDAQ was down 279 points. The S&P 500 down 106 points. Today in Chicago, we're expecting a high of 36 degrees. It will be cloudy, though. Milwaukee will be cloudy, 36 degrees will be your high. Madison, partly cloudy. Your high will be 38 degrees. It's kind of cold in this part of the country. Everybody, I've got a superstar panel today. Superstar panel to talk about Elizabeth Warren and what her withdrawal from the race means. Will there be a woman on the ticket, and should it just be any woman, or should it be that woman? You tell me. What do you think, everybody? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT, and um, let's talk about what happened with Elizabeth Warren. I think it was just okay. She's withdrawing from the race. We kind of expected that, but it was after she withdrew the conversations that I heard. The soft, the gentle conversations, the disappointment. Um, because, in fact, if there is one person who drove Michael Bloomberg out of the race, it was she. She did do that. And you got a chance to see over the past few weeks her power. This brilliant, razor sharp, laser focused mind. I just have so much admiration and respect for her. That having been said, I'm not going to count her out. I just know that there's much more for her. But we have to talk about this with everybody today. Michael O'Connor and Roosevelt and everybody else, we will get to you. But I'm going to bring up this panel right now so that we can talk about, I want to get some opening comments from these women about her withdrawal from the race. We're welcoming to the show Reverend Marcia Dyson, one of the nation's lead, really a global activist. We're so glad that she's with us today once again. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, President-elect of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the world, 66,000 plus lawyers. Aaron Connolly, WeBridge Consultants, one of our nation's leading young political organizers, and Reverend Attorney Jeanette Wilson, pastor, um, and minister and educator and lawyer of Rainbow Push. Let me start with you, Attorney C.K. Hoffler. In about a minute or so, what has the candidacy of Elizabeth Warren meant to you, and what does her withdrawal from the race mean?
Well, first of all, good morning. Good morning. I think Elizabeth Warren's withdrawal means that gender discrimination, gender inequity is alive and well. But I also think that it means that people are not ready for a real progressive agenda. So I think part of the reason why on Super Tuesday, in my humble impression, she did not do as well is in part because of gender, but also in part because of her agenda and all the other dynamics. She did single-handedly take out Bloomberg, in my humble impression. She really, really did.
Oh boy, did she ever.
Focused. She is an extraordinary debater. She was right on the points. I think she had a lot of appeal. I think she had greater appeal to many than Hillary Clinton did. But at the end of the day, where we are today in this country, I believe, for that number one position, for President of the United States, this country is not ready, it appears. And if anyone were ready to do it, it would be the Democrats first, I believe. Not ready yet to have a woman as laser focused as Elizabeth Warren, who has a progressive agenda. So I think it's both. I just, as an African American woman, I can tell you and trial lawyer, in my experience, a lot of times, it's hard for me to determine where I get more opposition. Is it because I'm a woman or because I'm African American? And I believe that sometimes it really, really is because I'm a woman. Because that shuts down so many people. Then I have to just open it back up. It doesn't stop me from doing what I have to do, but it certainly does make it difficult. And that is what, in part, what we saw with Elizabeth Warren. She talented, absolutely. Could she have done it? Without a question. She ran circles in some respects. From a policy standpoint and how she completely went from beginning, middle to end with her analysis on a lot of her policy positions, where some of the men on the stage still have yet to develop a policy position on certain issues.
And she knew that she couldn't come out here with a half baked policy position. She didn't have the space. Marcia Dyson, what say you?
Good morning. I concur somewhat with the good attorney, but I do believe this. It is about her. It was about her gender. It was about the aesthetics of her gender. For the woman, it could have been a little bit about ageism,
Mm,
and it could also have been a lot about her agenda because what we try to make people believe because we can see folks on CNN or MSNBC and other networks is that what we're witnessing is kind of an endorsement or understanding by mass population of what the ideologies of all of the presidential primary hopefuls were and are, whether it's Bernie's so-called democratic socialism or what we think Elizabeth Warren's progressive politics are. We're under the assumption that we have, I won't say ignorant people, but we don't have well-informed citizens to understand what the real platforms were. We always judge more by personality than anything. And for those people who could not vote for Hillary, though she did win the popular vote, there's something about what women do, not only being on stage, but how they present themselves on stage. Like you said, the wife Bernie winning and Elizabeth didn't because, as someone said, I think you said in the before we came on air, is that you have to be able to motivate, to move, and to rile, well, no matter to rile up, no matter to the left or to the right, the people to whom you're trying to attract in this game called politics, and who the spectators are, who you can make your real avid fans. And I think Bernie, the reason why Elizabeth got out, was able to because of his hockey mentality, like Trump. I call it hockey mentality because I think that's one of the most beautiful force that you have to navigate and kind of act like you're smooth on ice, but at the end of the day, you're going to take those hockey sticks and try to hit someone, and that's what Bernie had. And Elizabeth did not navigate that well. And as far as her agenda and policies are, I think that some of her missteps, besides her being a female, was that she not so much flip flop, but her numbers didn't work well for those people who were looking for her, since she was taking us to school, than those who had kind of the weight and balances in the background was also looking over her test and seeing that it wasn't right. And I think that because she did some of that, like I like Bernie's free everything, that she had the plan. Every time she would say something, I was like writing down the numbers. I'm like, whoa, we just tripped at the debt. Her intent was right. Her numbers were wrong. And so because she is a woman, just like any African American who ran for something, that's why we don't have Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, you know, to make this long haul run today, is because of their blackness. It's her about her womanhood. You had to do much, much more, and you had to be more accurate. You couldn't come out there with just personality only, though she had that. Remember, she took the most selfies than anybody, and people take selfies find that that's so endearing. So that kind of surprised me that she didn't win any delegates. Enough to let her to sustain herself. So it's a little bit complex because the dance is so different than any other time in our politics, our political history, I think.
I agree with you, and I want you to keep calling us at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. We're going to hear from Reverend Attorney Jeanette Wilson and Aaron Connolly when we get on the other side of the break so that we can fully flesh this out. And you know what, men, you can call too. We want to hear what you have to think. We want to hear what you have to say, what's on your minds, because this is about a direction for our country. This is about Social Security. This is about health care for all, if we're going to have that. Public schools. What are we going to do about those? What are we going to do about affordable housing? What are we going to do about our basic rights? About saving the republic? A lot of issues are at play here right now. And social and cultural issues. Racism, sexism. We're talking about that today. As I shared with you, Shirley Chisholm said, I thought racism was going to be my hurdle, my highest hurdle. She said, oh no, sexism, that was the rub for me. Wow. And it's still the rub. Sometimes a woman, you're supposed to have a smart president, at least that's what we say we want, but women can be too smart. We're still being forced to deal with likability, and now it's electability. Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Just back in just a few minutes, streaming live on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Back in a minute. Hey, 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 everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, streaming live in Milwaukee on 1017 FM, everybody. You can go to 101 talk 1017fm.com if you want to stream us live there. And we're in Madison. Talk 927 FM. You can go to talk927fm.com if you want to stream us live. And you can also, out of Chicago, WCPT820.com. And join us over on Facebook on the Santita Jaclson and Friends page. You can see us all in here. Lady B, Mateo, I think Zoe's on the other side of the glass. That's right. Got a lot going on today as we talk about Elizabeth Warren. We're going to have the national co-chair of the Bernie Sanders campaign, Congressman Ro Khanna, will be on with us in the next hour for the full hour, thankfully, so that we can talk about where we are. Because, I want to know. And we're still trying to get reoriented for a presidential race without Elizabeth Warren in it. And I'm going to, as we've talked with Reverend Marcia Dyson, brilliant woman of the cloth, we're going to go to Attorney C.K. Hoffler and Aaron Connolly. Let's go to another woman of God, Reverend Attorney Jeanette Wilson. How you doing, Reverend Wilson? Doing great. What did you make of Elizabeth Warren in this race and of her withdrawing from it?
Well, I think she's in the tradition of Shirley Chisholm more so than any woman that's run for president since 1972. I think she's extremely gifted and extremely smart, but I think she has the same problem that Hillary Clinton had, one of the same problems, and that is women don't vote for women. I mean, if you look at the fact that we are the majority of the voting age population in this country, Hillary did not get the white women's vote in the numbers that she could have and should have. Women don't support women, whether it's in law, it's in ministry, it's in business. Women are more reluctant to have a woman as the CEO, a woman as the face of the company, the church, and in this case, the face of the nation. And so I think that's part of the reluctance. Her agenda was clearly more thought out than any of the men that she's running against. And I think it says something to our daughters that we are still fighting the same fight that the women who fought for the right to vote more than a century ago. We are still struggling to push against not a glass ceiling. It is almost as if it is a steel ceiling above us. And so we must teach our daughters not to give up hope and not to give out. And I think Elizabeth Warren is wrestling with what should I tell my daughters, my nieces, about this race and about this nation and the sexism that we face. We have, and I think those two men that are left must realize they owe it to the women who work in these campaigns, who have carried them thus far, to put a woman on the ticket, not just any woman, because we have several qualified. You have Stacey Abrams out of Georgia. You have Elizabeth Warren, who has indicated we can raise money, we can lift issues, we can prepare platforms, we can lead a movement, but they can't just pick any other man and think that's okay. And I think women have to rise up and speak to that issue. We cannot take this lying down. She's the most qualified candidate on the debate stage. She has the best platform, and we all know it, and yet she didn't get the kind of support in voter turnout and voter enthusiasm. You don't vote at a rally. You vote in the polls.
That's a real thought. Aaron Connolly, what say you?
To be honest with you, Santita, good morning, everyone. I was really upset. I was hoping she would stay on a little bit longer. I know I get the political calculation there, and I understand it completely, and I see, we all see where the race is going. At the same time, and I saw so many of my friends, my colleagues, women that I work with throughout the nation saying, I wanted to vote for a woman. I still have my vote, or I turned in my early ballot already, and I want that to count. It's 2020 for crying out loud in the Democratic primary. Women are, to Reverend Wilson's point, working on these campaigns. They're the volunteers. They're the ones making calls, and we're saying, we want somebody that represents us fully and has lived that aspect of being a woman that really are different in America. And she did have a plan for how to tackle some of those big issues, and saw, as a working class woman, and I think that's an important distinction to make. Elizabeth Warren was raised working class. She, had an excellent career and did great things for herself, but she understood working class values and understood how the economy connects to that, and really stood up for working people. And I think there's an element of sexism, certainly, and we have to stop telling our daughters that they can be president if we're not going to elect them president. It is, I think, demoralizing a little bit for our young people to hear one thing and then see the reality of it. So I think we have a lot of work to do to keep those young women motivated, and to support them in ways to be a part of the political process and empower them. And hopefully next time we'll be able to have a woman at the top of the ticket. But to that point, we have to rally together and say that we need a qualified vice presidential candidate. I think for both of the front runners now that are strong women and represent the values that people like Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris had in this fight.
Everybody, we're streaming live on the Santita Jaclson and Friends page on Facebook. Like and share, like and share. We're streaming live on YouTube on the Santita Jaclson Show. Like and subscribe. Go to talk1017fm.com up in Milwaukee and stream us. Talk927fm.com in Madison, Wisconsin, and stream us in WCPT 820 here in Chicago.com and stream us. We are talking about Elizabeth Warren, and in the top of the hour, we're going to be talking with Ro Khanna, Congressman Ro Khanna, national co-chair of the Bernie Sanders for President campaign. What is going on? They're still counting votes out in California, everybody. Millions have not been counted yet, and the race is in the balance. But we're talking about Elizabeth Warren right now. I mean, attorney, well, first you, Reverend Dyson, what do you tell your daughters? What do do we tell them now? Because, the conversation had been, I remember, when I was a little girl, will you ever have a black president? I remember I had a gym teacher named Mr. Ball who said you could do anything, anything. And I don't know what came out of me, Reverend Dyson, Attorney Hoffler, Aaron Connolly, and Reverend Wilson. I said, can a black person be president? And I was not the smart alecky kid. And he said, he looked stunned. I was like 9, right? So this is a long time ago. He looked stunned. And I remember when my father was about to run for president, he said, I don't want you to grow up in a country where you have a ceiling on your dreams. Your daddy doesn't want that for you. So if this is what it takes, because we also knew we were sending him out and we might not get him back. You remember that, Reverend Dyson. You remember that, Reverend Wilson. You remember that well. But he said, I can't let you grow up in a country like that. And if something happens to me, you will know where you still have to go. And I feel like this is where women are, because of course we cannot forget, he was the first top tier candidate to say that he would put a woman on the ticket. And it was his advocacy that got Geraldine Ferraro on the ticket. In short, we have to advocate for each other, Reverend Dyson. But what do we tell our daughters in 2020? That was 30 plus years ago.
Well, I was listening to, I think it was Reverend Wilson. How you doing, Reverend Wilson?
Good morning. How are you, my sis, Dr. Dyson?
I'm doing well. One thing that you said, which, you would think that since this March is Women's History Month, it's not as if it's in the basement of our minds. It should be in the attic of our mindset, that if we could say that women, especially we know black women, definitely enable people to get elected into office, even into the White House. And if we say that women are the ones who are instrumental in getting out the vote regardless of race, then it still amazed me, even though I wasn't leaning toward Elizabeth Warren, that the women just didn't come out and push Elizabeth to enable her to stay up on this primary campaign trail. And that's very telling. That has nothing to do mostly with her agenda or her agenda. I think that we have to say, if what you say is true, Reverend Wilson, and we do know the pettiness sometimes amongst women, is our inability to push it forward. It's not like we don't have the power. We have the economic power. We are in the boardroom and the CEOs, even though they're few. We drive the economy. We are the ones who are the highest rate of, especially black women and entrepreneurs
Mm-hmm.
now, and in every industry. So we have to stop and have a sister check during Women's History Month why we did not enable this woman who is bold, who is brilliant. Like I said, even though I may not have agreed with her math, but who was the most thoughtful and well planned candidate on that primary stage, especially during the debates. How come we didn't push her since we do have that power? So first we got a female problem amongst ourselves. And then when you think about what the expectation is in this race, remember, I always look at politics as nothing but another sport. And if I go in there remembering who is it that I'm trying, who is the big mean gladiator that's trying to be defeated, in the mindsets of most people, especially in the Democrat Party or progressive or independents or liberals, is Trump. And so I think it became more gendered because they see it as a mano. Who can take the man out? And I think that people look like, well, you got that white man over in the White House, you got that two white men over here. Now we got the B&B, not bread and breakfast. You got Biden and Bernie, and so the contest was about who could defeat it in this man-man fight because we have to have someone. And would Elizabeth fight dirty? She fought intelligently, right? But if we're going to use this as a sport, then we need some people who can really knock. I'm talking about I'm talking about maybe the mindset. So it wasn't just her being a woman and how we want to allow men to put us on the ballot. We didn't let the women didn't put on the ballot. If what Reverend Janet is saying, which I do kind of believe, is that we have to have this conversation. How come the women didn't pull her over?
Well, see, but that's why I'm having the conversation today, because I heard from more women, Reverend Dyson, Attorney Hoffler, Aaron Connolly, Reverend Wilson. I hear from women today. I just didn't like Hillary. I'm like, what didn't you like about her? You did okay. So what does that mean?
Well, but see, I think women are more critical of women, how they dress, when Hillary ran, and even with Elizabeth Warren, there's a look that we expect women to have, and Attorney Hoffler knows this plays out in the courtroom every day. It's imagery that women put on other women, and they'll let a man walk around and anything and still say, well, he's qualified. So women have other barriers to overcome in terms of our positioning and our ability to move forward. And we don't push each other. We're in conflict. And some people say she seemed like a school teacher. Well, in many ways she did, but she gave us information. And so I think we have to decide, as when Reverend ran, when is it our time? When do we decide it's our turn to lead? Every other world nation, they have women in leadership. And so I think those are some things we have to look at. And I think we can press now for a woman to be vice president.
Mm. Attorney Hoffler? Okay, no, please jump in. Should we push? Should a woman be on the ticket this time?
Yeah, absolutely. A woman should be on the ticket. Oh, I'm sorry. Absolutely. I agree. I agree with Reverend Jeanette Wilson, my sister. Good morning. And good morning to this wonderful panel. And thank you again. Thank you.
Good morning, the best trial lawyer in the country.
The best.
Absolutely, a woman should be on the ticket. And I think that we should, right now, Bernie Sanders is struggling in some capacity, in some sense, although I think he's going to win California. So it ain't over till it's over.
Mm-hmm.
But even if he wins California, the party has aligned solidly behind Joe Biden, whether we like it or not. This is a time when the party can. There are two huge platforms that are not addressed by Biden. One having to do with the African American agenda. What is his plan? And the other, how does he address this gender bias that is lurking in the air? You address that, in my humble impression, by having a black woman on the ticket. I think you should have a woman on the ticket. But when you've got forces to be reckoned with in this community that could bring together our splintered, fighting, hot mess acting, whatever Democratic Party that could do it, I think that he should do that. I think he must do that. So I would say absolutely a woman must be on the ticket. I think that would carry it over because the one thing about women, yes, I see this in the courtroom every day. We're harder on women. We are tougher on women. We expect the world of a woman. We let the men walk around doing I don't know what, but that's the nature of the beast today in this world. So the only way to bring about change is to bring about change and to push it. And when there's an opportunity right now to put someone on the ticket that makes sense, that makes good political sense so we can win, I think this is the time to push it. And finally, Santita, what do we say to our daughters? Keep fighting. But we have to say something to our sons, too.
Amen.
We have to tell our sons, this is not right. We have to tell our sons that. Because if we allow our sons to believe, well, it's okay, I know this happened, but it's okay, then they will think it's okay, even if they have a very progressive mom. And when they go on and do great things, they will think it's okay to have an extraordinarily qualified woman who's doing these things, who could push the agenda and just push her aside and relegate her to a secondary role versus putting her in a primary position.
Amen to that. Let me go. Well, hold on. I want to go to Renee because she's interestingly enough, we have a lot of men who've called this morning, and I want to hear from you. But let me go to Renee first. Renee, what's on your mind today?
Good morning. And, I was trying not to call because I'm trying to get ready to work. But I am a woman who hires female attorneys. I am a woman who would love to see a woman in the White House, not because she's a woman, but because she's the most qualified person. I really like Elizabeth Warren. I liked her in 2016 and wished that she had run then, too. But my other person that I really wanted to run was Bernie, and he did, and I supported him. I didn't support Hillary, not because she's a woman, but I didn't support her because of what happened with Gaddafi and how she was on a television show laughing about it. We came to call him and he died. I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that she was instrumental in the coup in Honduras. And then when the children tried to flee, she said, don't let the children come into our country. She did many things that I did not like. I support Bernie because he's been fighting since he was in college for civil rights. I support Warren because she's fighting for that stuff now. But as she said, she used to be a Republican. Her ideology has changed. I would vote for her if it was her against anybody but Bernie Sanders because I think that he really wants to do the things I think the country needs. I know I need what he's talking about. My grandbaby needs medical care and will to sustain her life for the rest of her life. My son has $100,000 worth of student loan debt from Harvard Law School. I need Bernie Sanders, but I would gladly take Elizabeth Warren if it was her against Biden or anybody else also. So it's not a woman thing. It's the most qualified person thing for me.
Well, what do you think pushed her out the campaign, Renee? Do you think she just didn't have the right presentation? What do you think happened?
I think she was running with Bernie in the same race. I think if he wasn't in the race and he already had a lot of supporters, I think she would have done better. But if you have both of them and they're very similar, I think that's what did that. I love Elizabeth Warren.
But what's interesting? Well, let me stay right there, Renee, because it's interesting. Aaron Connolly, we have space for several moderates or conservative Democrats, but it's like we can only run one progressive Democrat. Because even Elizabeth Warren, but I thought she was giving herself some wiggle room when she said, we had two lanes, but there wasn't room for a third lane. I don't know if she was giving herself room to be the moderate or the more acceptable progressive or a more progressive moderate. You know what I mean? I didn't know what she was doing with that, but I'm not mad because it's politics, right? So what do you think happened?
I think she did speak to a large, maybe quieter electorate, especially online. I think we see a lot of people upset that she's no longer in the race that weren't maybe as vocal and active as the Sanders progressives. And there is kind of a pragmatic, progressive portion of her supporters that um, may regret standing on the sidelines for as long as they did. There's just not enough of the people, I think, that would leave Bernie Sanders and saw that he did have a strong movement. Let's give him credit where credit is due. His grassroots fundraising and his organizing is top notch. He's been organizing for years and has teams of people on the ground that are committed to his vision and mission. And I think we have to give that movement credit that they've been able to stay together and stay motivated and move across the country and have an impact on the ground from a field organizing perspective. I'm not sure that, Elizabeth Warren had the time to build that up as a working class progressive coming into the field, where, you see kind of the moderate go a different approach, and then we see Mike Bloomberg just buy all of the ad time in the entire country and still lose.
So, he sucked a lot of air out the room. He did, but then she took him out.
And we have to thank her for that, and we have to consider that. I hope whomever is the nominee hires Elizabeth Warren to do debate prep. we have to thank her for poking holes in the Bloomberg candidacy and showing what that really looked like on stage in front of a national audience. And I think I will miss her voice in the next debate because she was always prepared with a plan and articulated the problems so well, I think, and shows us what we have to work on.
Absolutely. You know what? I only have a couple minutes left in the segment, so I wish I could talk about this more. But we'll come. I'm going to bring you all back so that we can have, and maybe we'll just take a couple of hours to talk about this. But I want to get 30 seconds from you, tight 30, so that I can get some closing thoughts from you, Reverend Dyson.
We definitely need a woman on the ticket. Elizabeth Warren would, to me, be a great, I think, opportunity to bring in the numbers that she had and the sensibility and her well thought out plans. If we had a black woman on the agenda, it would mend some of the brokenness that a lot of African Americans might feel about being ignored, especially since we have the loss of our black primary hopefuls. So I think it's important to make sure that Elizabeth Warren has to be somewhere in somebody's mind in an administration if they plan on getting rid of Trump and the Democrat Party.
Reverend Wilson.
I think the Women's March committee all across the nation should call for a woman to be on the ticket, and we should march across this nation and demand that both of the men tell us which woman are you going to put on your ticket if you're the nominee. That should be the debate question. Women need to be calling for it all across the country. We must fight now. Now is the time.
Erin Connolly, 30 seconds.
I will march with you, Reverend Wilson, and I think everyone should start talking about people like Stacey Abrams, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, other strong women that would make a great vice president. And I agree, we should have Senator Sanders and Vice President Biden stand up and say, who are you going to choose and who are you going to build something with in an administration?
Attorney Hoffler.
I agree. I concur with the last few speakers. The time is now. If women are prepared to stand up for women and to say, look, we are insisting on this, we're the greatest voting bloc, and black women in particular, we know for Bernie Sanders he's going to need black women to win. If we're not prepared to do that now, then shame on us, but I think we are prepared. We just have to have the agenda and the catalyst to do it, and now is the time. And Elizabeth Warren has really, frankly, paved the way for us to do that. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we have to do. Whether it's Stacey Abrams or Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris or others, but at least we know we've got three phenomenal women to pick from. There's never going to be an argument. We just couldn't find anyone who could do it. Any one of those women could do it.
Absolutely. And we have to press all of these women and the men who run for president and vice president, press them about their agenda, because that's what we need help. The fact is, it takes a black woman 20 months to make what a white man makes in 12. of similar skills. It takes an Hispanic woman 23 months. That has to be on the agenda in 2020 and going forward. We've got to close this wage and wealth gap that's gender based, that's race based. We've got to make America just and fair. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Reverend Marcia Dyson, Aaron Connolly, and Reverend Attorney Jeanette Wilson. You know I love you all. Thank you, my sisters, for being with me today. We've got Congressman Ro Khanna, the national co-chair of the Bernie Sanders for President campaign, coming up just in a moment. Back in just a few. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jaclson Show in Milwaukee and Madison and Chicago, Illinois, and in other cities. We're rolling out. We're so excited. We're based here in Chicago at WCPT 820, and we have our Milwaukee home 1017 FM. That's talk1017fm.com. You can stream us live there. And in Madison, 927 FM. That's right, political talk, the best. You can stream us live in Madison at talk927fm.com. And of course, if you want to see us over on Facebook, hello, cha-cha, you're on the Santita Jaclson and Friends page, Santita Jaclson and Friends. And you can like and share. Please like and share. And let's have some watch parties so that we can have some great political talk. At least that's what we try to do here. And on the Santita Jaclson Show, which is over on YouTube. Like and subscribe. I've got a lot of callers. I'm going to come to you before we get Congressman Ro Khanna up. But we want to talk with you today about Elizabeth Warren, but we are going to hear from Congressman Ro Khanna, the Silicon Valley congressman, brilliant young lawyer and progressive firebrand, who is the national co-chair of the Bernie Sanders for President campaign. He's going to let us know what's going on, why he supports Bernie Sanders, why he thinks that we ought to, and what's the path forward. I'm so excited to talk with him. We met him last week, Lady B, in South Carolina. I've been watching him on television. I've been so impressed with his progressive ideas. And he comes from a very interesting history. He has a grandparent who was arrested with and was jailed with Mohandas K. Gandhi as they were trying to free India from colonialism, from the boot of British colonialism. So he has a real history that he's not running away from, that he has embraced. So I'm very, very excited that he's going to be with us in just a few minutes. They're going to have some other people drop in so they can say hello to him this morning. Let's get a couple of things out the way, a few of these headlines, so that we can get on with the rest of the show and talk to the callers as well. Elizabeth Warren has ended her brilliant and issue-focused presidential campaign, Common Dreams says in their headline. What's next? Will she form an alliance with Bernie Sanders? Politically, she's already allied with him, but will she form a political alliance with Joe Biden? Will she, if he becomes president, would she join his cabinet? Would she be on his ticket? Would she be on Bernie Sanders' ticket? We want to know what she's going to do next. She said, we've got to take a breath. And she said, I'm thinking of all the little girls I gave a pinky promise to. When she said that, I almost cried, Lady B. Almost cried. I said, you know what? You go, Elizabeth Warren. She is not done yet, everybody. Not done yet. Karl Rove, interestingly enough, has weighed in on this campaign. He said Bernie Sanders still has a path to the nomination. That's right. The overall takeaway, according to the Daily Wire, from Super Tuesday is that former Vice President Joe Biden won the night. However, Karl Rove said, let's not kid ourselves, quote, we're focused on Biden because the results are coming in. Who had a better morning because he had a big night, but the guy who had a better morning was Bernie Sanders. That's right. The results are coming in from California. 5.3 million votes as of a couple of days ago were counted, but more than 10 million people cast votes in California. So almost half the votes as of a couple of days ago were still out, provisional ballots, absentee ballots. So hey, we will see. We will see. Bernie Sanders is expected to clean up in the biggest, most populous state in the United States of America. What will that mean? What will that mean? And do you mind waiting days and days and days and days for the results? I don't mind, but I told you a few days ago, if we think this is something, you wait until we get to November. Because remember, we're supposed to have more people voting in November of 2020 than have voted in more than 100 years, since 1908, in terms of percentages. 180 to 190 million people are expected to vote. And the system is not prepared, as we speak, to accommodate all of these voters. Because remember, originally, everybody wasn't supposed to vote. Only property white men. Those were the rules back then. Mike Bloomberg plans a new group to support the Democratic nominee. And, it's very interesting. Romney, former Governor Romney, now Senator Romney from the great state of Utah, said there's no question the appearance is not good. What is he talking about? The Republican subpoena targeting the Bidens. He said, no, I don't think, he said, I'm considering my vote, but this is not good. So he could derail that, and good for him, good for him. Nathaniel Woods, sadly, out of Alabama. The state of Alabama executed him yesterday. Last night he was pronounced dead at 9:01 p.m. local time after the U.S. Supreme Court issued a temporary stay of execution that was later lifted, and Republican Governor Kay Ivey declined to exercise her powers of commutation or reprieve despite widespread public outcry. Why was there public outcry? Because he was not guilty. Someone else admitted to the crime of killing three police officers. And yet he was killed anyway because they said he lured the police officers to the address where they were killed. Is that why you kill somebody, everybody? Oh, the Veterans Administration has unlawfully turned away vulnerable veterans for decades, more than 400,000 of them, everybody. The Department of Veterans Affairs has turned away thousands of veterans, according to this Washington Post article, with other than honorable discharges, rendering some of the most vulnerable veterans invisible and desperate for help. Now, what do you think about that? 400,000 people who have served? Where are they to go, everybody? Where are they to go? What are they to do? The gig economy is really hurting those of us who are coping with the coronavirus. They have no choice but to go to work. White-collar workers are being given the choice to stay home, according to the Washington Post. But those who are in the gig economy, the Uber drivers, the people who actually clean the buildings, those people who work in the big box stores, if they don't work, they don't eat. What are they going to do? Do you want someone who cooks for you to be sick with the coronavirus? This is when we have to look at Medicare for all, everybody. The CDC says do not go to work, but our president is saying you could go to work and get better. Now, he is a notorious germaphobe. Is he serious? Bless his heart. Does he want the people who make up his bed, who make his food, sick and at work? Would you? Poor Mateo. My intern just squeezed his eyes really tightly. He said, "What? No, I don't want that." So, everybody, let's think about that, and let's continue to pray for those of our people who are coping with the coronavirus. It's a pandemic. It's all over the world on 6 of the 7 continents. Everybody, the Blackhawks of Chicago, 4-3 over the Oilers. Yay! The Chicago Bulls are going to be playing tonight, and the Bucks are going to be facing the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be facing the Lakers. Now that's going to be a great game. Yeah, I can't wait. I cannot wait. The Dow was down 969 points yesterday, everybody, wiping out the gains. Well, it's been a roller coaster as we're coping with the coronavirus. The NASDAQ was closed down 279 points. The S&P 500 closed down 106 points. Chicago, we're expecting a high, although it will be cloudy, of 36 degrees. Milwaukee will be cloudy, but 36 degrees. In Madison, a high of 38 degrees, although it will be partly cloudy. The sun will be peeking through. Everybody, I am so excited to welcome this guest to the show, and you're going to be hearing a lot more from him on this show because, I just think he's got a lot to say. He's had a tremendous body of experiences. Brilliant, 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 brilliant young man. Brilliant mind. He's a lawyer. He's a scholar. He's also from the University of Chicago. Yay! Yay! Although, they don't have football or basketball there. They do intramural sports. It's just big fun. There are a lot of brainiacs at that school. My dad went there, and so did my brother. It's a great, 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 great school. But one of the most impressive things about him is that with all of his privilege and with all of his brilliance, he continues to fight for the least of these. He's been trying to broaden opportunities for people to get into Silicon Valley. He's known as the Silicon Valley congressman. And we just welcome to this show someone who's now we've made him part of the family here, Lady B.
Yeah.
That's right. Congressman Ro Khanna. Do we have any applause for him?
Yes,
Wait a minute.
we do.
Where are you? What's
Wait
going
a
on? Give
minute.
it to him today. Lady B. She's doing so many things. Cheers. There you go. you deserve it all.
A radio or television program. I'm honored. I'm so honored. I so admire everything you do and what you stand for and your passion and your purity of heart. And it's really just an honor to be on your program.
Oh, and I'm honored to have you here today. I'm so glad that we were able to get you and to get you for the amount of time that we have for you today. And of course, you are the national co-chair of the Bernie Sanders for President campaign. Why did you choose to be a part of his campaign? We've had Joe Biden, who's been running. We've known he was going to run for a long time. You had Elizabeth Warren, who was going to run, but she's a progressive. But it seems to me you made an ideological choice. You made a choice when you chose to be with Bernie Sanders. Why him?
I did, Santita, for a few reasons. First, on foreign policy, he has stood for human rights, and many people don't talk about what's going on in Yemen, but it's one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world. There are millions of people who are facing famine and starvation, and we, as the United States, unfortunately, were complicit in that. We were supporting the Saudi bombing of Yemen. And Senator Sanders worked as the only senator with some of us in the House to pass the first war powers resolution in the history of in the United States to stop our support for the Saudi bombing in Yemen. I led the effort in the House. He did in the Senate. So I've worked with it over the course of 2 years. In the beginning, the entire defense establishment and even people in our own party were against us. So I saw his courage to stand up for what is right, not just here, but abroad. And then I think his moral clarity about giving people a chance in our society. I mean, he understands that there are so many people who basically don't have health care. I mean, even if you have insurance, if you've got massive deductibles and copays, people aren't getting the treatment and are going bankrupt or are, in some cases, getting sick or even dying because they aren't being able to afford to go to see a doctor or go to the hospital. He understands that the debt that so many people had. I mean, I took out an extraordinary amount of loans, and you mentioned I've been very, very privileged and fortunate in my life, and so it wasn't as big a deal, and I've been able to pay them off after 15 years and doing well. But there are a lot of people who don't have that situation, who have $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 of debt, can't start a family, can't get a house, and he understood that. He understood the disparity in public schools. I mean, the fact that we have schools where teachers are making 20, 30, 35, 40,000 that have broken buildings, that aren't investing, all of that he understood sort of a moral justice vision, and that's what drew me to him.
Do you think it's important for us to really look at politics through a new lens? I mean, it seems to me that that which is pragmatic is favored over that which is just. I mean, I hear you talk about that which is moral. Why is that important in our politics as we move forward as Americans and as global citizens?
Peter, that's a wonderful point. I mean, so much of our conversation in politics is pragmatic. Is this going to lead to more economic growth? Is this going to lead to more jobs? But our nation was founded on a moral principle. I mean, this idea that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that every person is endowed, is created equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights. And our greatest leaders have helped try to bring that moral vision to reality, whether that was Frederick Douglass or Lincoln or W.B. Du Bois or Dr. King or John F. Kennedy or your father, Reverend Jackson. I mean, what inspires people in America is how we live up to our moral vision. And so the point is that there's still a lot of people who aren't equal in our country, who don't have the basics. And I think this gets to the fundamental philosophy that Sanders stands for, and that is that to be free, to be equal, it's not enough to just have a Bill of Rights which says we're not going to restrict your speech, your right to worship, your right to assemble. You also need basic economic security to be free. You need a job, you need health care, you need education, and that's really what he's working towards.
Well, coming out of South Carolina, which is where I met you last week, and we all fell in love with you after we talked with you. We said, you're so warm, you're so accessible, and it's always wonderful to meet people who really are trying to be engaged with the people, if you will. And which brings me here. Because we've spent a lot of time in Kevin Gray's restaurant, the Railroad Barbecue Restaurant. we had some good food and good times there. That having been said, we were wondering, okay, where do we go from here? Because we were surprised at the size of the victory that Joe Biden was able to score, and black people delivered it to him. And we were feeling as we talked to young people, because we interviewed people at the Railroad Barbecue restaurant for a couple of days. Young people wanted Bernie Sanders overwhelmingly. Overwhelmingly, they wanted Elizabeth Warren, but something there was some kind of disconnect, and we're hearing that there could be a shift in how blacks in the South vote and how blacks in the North vote. Uh, can you help me with that? I mean, what's happening here? Because he was the front runner there, and the race is still incredibly close, Congressman Khanna. Still very, very close. Because we still haven't heard everything from California. You all are still counting the votes. There's so many of you out there. What is there? Is what happened in South Carolina? Let me just start there. What happened?
Um, well, first of all, let me say that I had said even a week before South Carolina, when the press was trying to say Bernie Sanders' nomination is looking inevitable, or he's looking really strong after Nevada, that Sanders is an underdog. We have to remember how he started out. I mean, he's taking on the insurance industry. He's taking on the pharmaceutical industry. He doesn't have the support of party leadership. And so the fact that we are now within 60 delegates, and I think when California is all counted, that's probably going to be about 30 delegates. So we're at about, we'll be about 560, and Joe Biden's at 590. And to put in perspective, I mean, Bloomberg is at 60, and Warren, who I have a lot of respect for, was at 60 delegates. I mean, we've come a long way. Sanders has come a long way. But South Carolina, I think there were a few points. I mean, on the positive side, we won younger black voters under 35. They like Sanders' message on Medicare for all. They understand the message on public education being invested in, on child care, on free public college, on making sure that we're investing in public schools and in communities that have been left behind. But just to have some real talk, I mean, I think we needed to do better in outreach. I think I wish we had Kevin Gray running the effort.
Absolutely.
Ran your father's campaign in '88, and I believe, I mean, because real talk, I mean, we needed to be in more churches, we needed to be in more black radio, we needed to do more organizing with the community, more relationship building, and the field model that works in some other states where you just get young people calling and knocking on doors is not enough. I think you have to really build relationships with the community leaders in the churches, in restaurants, in HBCUs. And so we've learned some of that from the South Carolina experience, and I think in Michigan you're going to see a very, very robust engagement with the community who's brainstorming that state. We're hopeful that we're going to have some prominent endorsements coming up in the community. He's going to do more outreach on radio and on programs. But I think that the message is there. But as you know, Santita, from your many years in politics, the message doesn't matter until you have the relationships. You first have to make the relationship, and then people will hear the message.
Well, the relationships do matter, and then so many things have to come together, Congressman Khanna. Your message, your relationships, and let's get to the message, because many people have pushed back. America is very progressive on one side, and it can be very, very conservative, to put it rather mildly, in other respects. Everyone is saying, they describe him initially of just as this democratic socialist. He's a socialist. I was talking to a very close friend of mine. He said, well, I could never vote for a socialist. I said, he's really, have you heard of the New Deal? What? He's really an FDR Democrat. I mean, do you agree with that? Or how would you classify him? Because I see him fulfilling the New Deal of the 30s and 40s.
Tina, that's exactly how I describe his politics. I mean, FDR talked about everyone having the right to health care, the right to education, the right to a job. And all Bernie Sanders is saying is give everyone the chance that this country gave to someone like me. I mean, I got to go to a very good public school in Pennsylvania. My parents were fortunate that we had health care. I got to go get a regular dental checkup every year. We were middle class growing up, but I didn't have to ever worry about getting a good meal or lunch at school. I was able to take on loans for higher education. If this country could do that for a son of an immigrant, don't you think it could do that and should do that for every American? And yet it hasn't, and it hasn't for many communities for hundreds of years. And what Bernie Sanders is saying is, let's fulfill the New Deal. Of course, the New Deal was racially exclusionary, as you know, because of redlining and because many people, even though after the New Deal with the GI Bill, many African Americans didn't get to take advantage of it. So what Sanders is saying, let's complete the New Deal, but let's make sure that it's multiracial, multi-ethnic, and applies to everyone. And that, in a nutshell, is his vision.
Well, you know, everybody, we're talking with Congressman Ro Khanna. He is the national co-chair of the Sanders campaign, and we're talking about really completing the New Deal, everybody, just as LBJ completed the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendments. He looked and he said, look, it's 1965. In 1870, we gave African American men the right to vote. Now, we've not fulfilled that promise. That's what the Voting Rights Act was about. And I see, personally, you're hearing me say this now, I see Bernie Sanders in that tradition. I do. And so I want to know what you have to say. I want to know what you have to say. And no matter who becomes the nominee, we're going to have to negotiate. We're going to have to fight. But you know what? Let's do that when we get to Milwaukee. Right now, we have to fight not just for what we want, but for who we want. The person who we really believe is going to get this ball across the line. I think we have that guy. I want to know what Congressman Khan is going to do with his future, but that's a little further down the road. More of the Santita Jaclson Show, streaming live on WCPT820.com and talk 927fm.com. Back in just a minute. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, streaming live in Milwaukee at talk1017fm.com. Talk1017 FM, that's our home station there, and in Madison, Talk 987 FM. You can go to talk987fm.com, and of course, here in Chicago, our home station, WCPT820.com. We're streaming live on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and you can like and share over there, and on our YouTube page, the Santita Jackson Show. Like and subscribe. Everybody, we're talking with Congressman Ro Khanna, the co-chair, one of the co-chairs of the Bernie Sanders for President campaign. And I want to know from you, Congressman Khanna, what do you think, what's going on in California? I understand that they're still counting the votes because there's so many of you who have voted. What are you expecting out of California, and what are we expecting in Michigan and Ohio, Illinois, just going forward?
Well, we had a big win, as you know, in California, almost 10 points. One of the interesting things is Bernie Sanders won my district and a lot of the Silicon Valley districts, and people think, how is he winning places with Apple, at Google, at Intel, at these places of extraordinary wealth? And I said, first of all, there are a lot of other people in Silicon Valley. I mean, there are the bus drivers and the teachers and the food workers and the janitors that also make the valley the valley. And actually, there are a lot of engineers who care about the costs of college and the costs of health care. So it's not just the CEOs making hundreds of millions of dollars. It's everyone else. And I think it's telling how much his message resonated in some of these areas that were fairly affluent. I believe we're going to be able to narrow the gap. I mean, the reason that California takes so long to count is you can technically mail in your ballot even on election day. So some of the ballots people don't get till 3, 4, 5 days after election if you put it in the mail on election day itself, and then they have to count some of the provisional ballots. So I think when all is said and done, it's going to help reduce the delegate lead. Right now, Biden's around 60 delegates up. I'm hopeful we'll be about 30 delegates behind. And then Michigan is critical. I mean, Senator Sanders is parking himself there. A lot of the state apparatus, of course, has endorsed Biden, with the governor endorsing Biden. But Sanders won last time. He won working class voters. His message against bad trade deals really resonates. It is a clear contrast with Vice President Biden. I mean, Sanders was opposed to NAFTA. He has opposed the Trans-Pacific Partnership very strongly. And his message also with the Arab American communities. I mean, he has really stood up for justice, for people of color, for the people who have a different faith, and he has a lot of support there. In fact, Abdul Saeed, who ran for governor, is endorsing him and campaigning all over with him. So I expect we'll do very well in Michigan. It's going to be close, but we will get our fair share of delegates. We will win Washington. We will win Democrats abroad. And then I think this comes down to a debate between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, and that may really be what starts to decide this.
Well, and I think it's important that we get the record straight. There was discussion from President Trump about cutting Social Security. And of course, when he ran, he said he wasn't going to touch that. But now after at Davos, he's told the elite there, well, that will be on the table after I win re-election. And it seems that Vice President Biden and Senator Sanders got into really some clarification, let's say, on Twitter last night, right, about Social Security. Can you explain that?
Well, Senator Sanders wants to expand Social Security. He thinks that seniors have not gotten basically a raise for years, and that it's very easy to expand Social Security. All we need to do is tax people on the Social Security on their income above $250,000. Right now, if you're making over $250,000, if you're a millionaire, if you're making $1 million a year, your tax stops at $130,000. And Sanders is saying, why is that fair? Why should a teacher pay tax on their entirety of their income for Social Security? Why should a dental hygienist pay that tax? on the entirety of their income. But if you're a millionaire, you don't pay tax on 90% of your income for Social Security. If you scrap that cap, and if you tax people over 250,000 on income for Social Security, you would not just be able to save Social Security, you'd actually be able to increase the benefits. And Joe Biden, in the past, it's public record, has talked about either limiting Social Security benefits or making some deal with Mitch McConnell about it. It's just a very different vision. I mean, Sanders believes that the money is there if you tax people over 250,000 to expand Social Security benefits.
It seems now we do have two clear visions of America. I hear Vice President Biden talking about a progressive future, but there is a difference between their visions, is there not? And if you agree, what are the differences?
There's the big differences. There was differences we talked about on expanding Social Security. There's a difference on health care. On Medicare for All, one of the things that I find frustrating is that we haven't conveyed to seniors how much Medicare for All is good for seniors. Because right now, I just had this experience with my mom. She needed to get her hearing tested. She had to get hearing aids. It cost a few $1,000s. Now, she's on Medicare, and Medicare doesn't cover hearing aids. Medicare doesn't cover dental. Medicare doesn't cover long-term care. God forbid your spouse or someone needs to be in a hospital for more than 30 days or needs to be in a long-term care facility for more than 30 days. You start having to pay $600 a day until you go bankrupt and get on Medicaid. Under Bernie Sanders' plan, everything is covered. Long-term care is covered. Dental is covered. Vision is covered. Hearing is covered. We no longer have these crazy deductibles. It's zero, and none of these copays. So seniors would benefit the most under Medicare for All. Joe Biden's plans don't do that. He would just keep the system as currently is. I mean, he'd offer a public option, but it's not improving the benefits for seniors that currently have Medicare. And that public option is still going to cost people thousands of dollars. That's one of the big differences. The other difference is on issues of war and peace. I mean, Sanders, building, frankly, on your father's campaigns in 84 and 88 has said we ought not to be putting all our money in military budgets. We ought not to be putting all our money in wars overseas. Santita, $6 trillion this country has spent on war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's a matter of public record that Vice President Biden supported the war in Iraq. The surge took place under the Obama-Biden administration in Afghanistan. Think of what we could have done with those $6 trillion. I mean, China hasn't been in a war since 1979. Imagine if instead we put those $6 trillion in giving everyone free public education and free college or trade school. That's only $80 billion, by the way, a year. Here we're talking $6 trillion. Imagine if we gave everyone a hot meal for school lunch. Imagine if we put the money in infrastructure, so we created construction jobs and manufacturing jobs. Imagine if we put it in our public schools, so we could actually pay teachers $60,000 of basic wage, and we could get books and computers in classrooms. Sanders is talking about not getting us in endless wars and investing in our country. And the final difference is on trade deals. I mean, Biden supported many of them. Sanders opposed them, not because Sanders is an isolationist. He wants us to work and trade with other countries. He just thinks that trade should respect union rights, environmental rights, workers' rights, should have the provisions in there that workers should get paid a certain amount. So it's not just multinational corporations exploiting workers, both in a foreign country and here. So they're very different visions. I mean, Sanders is in the tradition of completing the New Deal, and Biden, who I would prefer easily over Trump, is much more in the tradition of let's get incremental progress.
But so are you. I mean, it's interesting. I read about your National Apprentice Program because you're very interested in democratizing Silicon Valley, if you will, making Silicon Valley look not just like the United States, but making it look like the world. Can you explain this National Apprentice Program of yours?
Sure. One of the challenges, I think, in our education system is we have about 3 million people who graduate high school every year. A third of them get to go to college, but 2/3 don't. And we don't have a good system for those other 2/3 of people who don't finish a 4 4-year college degree. They should be able to get good paying jobs. That's never been more true than in a technology economy where, frankly, you may not need a 4-year degree. Having a specialized credential and understanding how to operate on a Tesla electric vehicle, or how to understand Amazon web design, on coding something in the cloud, or understanding how to do data processing, or understanding how to do basic business consulting. These are things that can be done with a 2-year or 18-month credential and some real work experience. And so what our bill does, the apprenticeship bill, is it says we're going to pay people to get these apprenticeships if the employer kicks in a certain amount, so that they don't have to take on debt, they can get practical skills, and they can get jobs. We actually worked in Benny Thompson's district in Mississippi. This company in my district, Robotics Process Automation, it went into where the Emmett Till Center is, and created robotics process automation jobs there for black women, in some of them single mothers, paying $20 to $25 an hour, and it was after an eight-month course. And so I think my view is, why are these jobs all offshore? Why are those jobs going to China, or India, or Brazil? Why aren't we creating those jobs here? And that's because of a lack of focus, and that's really what the apprenticeship program is designed to do.
That is a huge, huge boon. It will be a huge boon for our economy, and it just, it makes America what America's supposed to be. I want to bring in a couple of callers. I'd love to talk to you forever and ever and ever, but I want to bring in a couple of callers because they're eager to speak with you, because we don't hear enough from you. But I'm glad that you're going to make this your home here, Congressman Connor, so you can hear more.
Taking some of these calls.
Absolutely. Let me go to Pam. Pam from Chicago. How you doing, Pam?
Good morning, Santita. Good morning, Representative Connor. My concern, the election. Thank you. Good to hear from you, and I've heard you before. I was an Elizabeth Warren supporter, and I'm very much with the progressive agenda. However, I'm concerned about Bernie Sanders' message. Just from my personal standpoint, when you talk about outreach, what kind of outreach, and words matter. So right now, what I'm hearing, Santita, in Chicago, people of color is not a term that's necessarily resonating in a good way with black people. Now, that's just what I'm hearing. So I want to ask you, when you talk about outreach, Senator Sanders had the same problem last election, and it doesn't seem like he's evolved much on how to reach the black community. Representative Clyburn, Joe doesn't know me. He says Joe knows black people. Santita, Joe don't know me. And I think Senator Sanders' message about health care for all, that's real. People are having a problem with the term free, because you know what that implies, Santita. Oh, poor people just want everything free. They don't want to work for anything. So I'm concerned about him just really, I guess, crystallizing his message. There's fear-mongering going on because with the socialism. So I just want to make sure that he's aware of what people are hearing on the street and over some of the airwaves, and to really get his message out. Because
so what you want him to do is to tweak his message. Congressman Connor, why don't you respond to Pam?
Yeah, well, Pam, first of all, thank you for that feedback. It's very thoughtful. Let me try to address a number of points. So first of all, Elizabeth Warren is an intellectual giant. I mean, she has made more contributions in this race in terms of policy than anyone. And I have tremendous admiration, tremendous respect for her, and she's going to have a huge role in any progressive future. So I just want to start by acknowledging that. Second, I agree with you. There's a difference in this country between being a person of color, which I am, and being black. And we need to be real about that. I mean, there's no community that has had a greater struggle, greater suffering or oppression than the black American community. And all of us are on their shoulders. I mean, if it weren't, we were saying that with Santita and several others, if it weren't for the civil rights movement, my parents wouldn't have been allowed in this country. And it's the civil rights movement that led to the 65 Immigration Act, where they said, okay, let people from China and India come. Before that, it was all basically immigration from Europe. So I do think we have to make a distinction between policies that are for restorative justice with the African American community and more broadly policies of people of color. And this is why I believe, in reparations and targeted investment in HBCUs and understanding that we need to be intentional about creating economic opportunity in communities left behind. I mean, one of the things that I've had this conversation that frustrates me is obviously there are issues of mass incarceration and police brutality, but those aren't the only issues of the black community. I mean, the black community, surprisingly, is actually the most patriotic community, despite all of the racism, and the most aspirational community. And so we need to talk about what are we doing with HBCUs, and what are we doing to get people entrepreneurship opportunities and home ownership and wealth creation. I mean, you talk about the racial wealth gap in this country, $1 to $10 for a white person and $1 for someone who's black. That's really getting worse if we don't have more opportunities in Silicon Valley and the new economy for black entrepreneurs, for black graduates from HBCUs, for people with black in apprenticeship. So I agree with you that we have to talk specifically about the black community and not just amorphously about people of color. And then the final point I would say is on Medicare for all. It's not free. It's clear who's going to pay for it. The people who are going to pay for it is the corporations. Right now, AT&T, 20% of their payroll goes into healthcare. Verizon, 33% of their payroll goes into healthcare. So what we're going to say to these companies is instead of giving all that money to the insurance companies, wouldn't you want to just buy that insurance at a cheaper rate from the government? And the tax is going to be on those corporations, and that's how we're going to pay for it. But it's not going to be a tax on the working class or the middle class.
You know what? I have a couple of people who I wanted to bring in, some to introduce, a couple to introduce to you, Congressman Connop, and they're all supportive of you. And of course, John Nichols, your very dear friend from the Nation magazine. But I want to bring on Jonathan Jaclson, national spokesman for the Rainbow Push Coalition. He's also my brother, and Attorney C.K. Hoffler, who is the president-elect of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the world, more than 66,000 lawyers. John Nichols, I got him today. I'm so glad that that we were able to bring Congressman Khanna on.
In an awful lot of situations. Amazingly enough, going back to, I think, Congressman, you'll clarify for me, was it 2004 I started writing about you?
Yeah, you wrote the first piece of the anti-war run, yeah. That's respect for John. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, I'm not on to do anything else but to join in Santita's good program here, but also to remind people that you have been at this for a long time, and you speak in this campaign as a veteran of the Obama White House, as someone who has worked in the business side, in the political side, in the entrepreneurial side, and I think that's a part of what makes you such an interesting figure in this 2020 campaign, because I think that your vision and your approach is one that frankly speaks a lot to the future of the Democratic Party. So I'm very glad Santita's got you on.
Well, and Jonathan Jaclson, you have been a longtime supporter of Congressman Sanders. And I don't know if you've met Congressman Khanna, but we're so glad to be able to connect all of you here today. Jonathan Jaclson, why don't you speak to Congressman Khanna?
Honor and pleasure to meet you, Congressman Khanna, and love the Nation.
I'm honored to meet you. I'm very familiar with your work.
Oh, thank you. I think the Nation is at a pivot point. It's about going left or right. It's about going backwards or forward. It's about peace over war. And clearly there's one choice. To me, that's President Bernie Sanders. I remember going into Iraq with my father in 1990 to try to stop Saddam Hussein from creating a person to have human shields. And the whole war that George H. Bush was then proposing and the momentum he was gaining and the popularity of it, it was very challenging to try to be anti-war when this man had human shields and so forth. But when we got back to the United States and had returned with those hostages, there was a friendly ear and a friendly man who was committed to anti-war, and that was in Senator, at the time, Congressman Bernie Sanders. This has been his life work. When you talk about fighting segregationists in Chicago and the youth of his life, Bernie Sanders was there, and I am proud to call him a friend, proud to stand up with him. I don't want someone to cajole racism, to play with it, to massage it, to manage it. We need someone as fierce and forceful and committed their entire life to eradicating it. And we have to eradicate racism. When you play with it, it can fester almost like any other virus, any other disease. Matter of fact, Albert Einstein called racism a disease, and Senator Sanders has fought that disease. The Democratic Party has to have an awakening, and it's a rude awakening. They've been playing around with racism, and now it's in a more, it has a Febreze finish with a new veneer, and it looks like Donald J. Trump, and far too often, too many of our colleagues have been playing with him. We need to take a stand. So I'm honored to be with all of you that are on the right.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, I got about a minute because I'm going to give the balance of my time, the balance of this time to Congressman Khanna, because we have more than 30 races to go.
Child has been changed.
Oops. Oh, now that's interesting.
Error. Please check the number and try your call again. Announcement 2. Switch to -41.
Well, now that's the wonderful thing about live radio. You just never know what's going to happen. Congressman Khanna. Goodness gracious.
The perspective of the guest. I mean, I think talking about Sanders' commitment to peace and civil rights are absolutely critical. And it's not just that his anti-war stances, which go back to Vietnam, which go back to opposing some of our intervention in Central America and an intervention in the Middle East, are good for human rights. It's that we need to make the connection that would have been trillions of dollars this country would have saved, wouldn't have gone to the defense contractors, to wars overseas, and would have been used to actually build our communities, to invest in our infrastructure, in our education, in our health care. And, Senator Sanders he doesn't like talking about it because he's modest, but I was talking to John Nichols, he was arrested in the 60s fighting for civil rights. I mean, his life work has been for social and racial justice. This is who he is as a person. And if you believe, as I do, that our challenge in America remains how do we truly become a multiracial, multicultural democracy? How do we live up to that founding promise, which still is not in our grasp over 200 years later? And then I believe someone like Sanders, with the coalition he is building, in many ways I view his campaign as building on not just the New Deal, not just Dr. King, but also the campaigns that your father ran in 84 and 88, a campaign sort of for a progressive vision of America, of what America was supposed to be. I think it's a unique moment. I don't think we're going to get a person like him who knows when again with the movement he's built. And that's why I have given it everything I can this past year. And the victory is within our grasp. I mean, this is the closest a progressive challenger has ever gotten to winning the nomination.
We are awfully close. We've got less than a minute. The mainstream media is projecting. Do people really know how close this race is, Congressman Khanna?
No, that's what's it's so concerning in terms of the media is projecting this as if Joe Biden is running away with the race, but you've got about 600 delegates for Biden, about 560 delegates for Sanders. I mean, this race is neck and neck. A couple states can change the outcome, and it could go either way. And we've seen in the fluidity of this race, we saw when Warren was up, we saw brief moment when Buttigieg was up. We've seen Biden be up and lose that lead. And so now there's going to be scrutiny on Biden, and like there has been on Sanders the past 3 months. And we'll see, where the race goes. But I'm really excited about the race because it's such two different visions of what you want the Democratic Party to be for the future, what you want America to be for the future. It's not just, I think that Joe Biden is a nice, very decent person, but that's not the point. The point is he going to stand up for a bold progressive vision, and what are the differences? And we're going to see that, and I think that's exactly what primary elections should be about.
Everybody, that's the key. Vote, 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 vote. God bless everybody. Until Monday. Blessings.